Major League Baseball's hot stove season is here, and welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us once again, and we are back for another off season of Major League Baseball. A bunch of moves have already happened. Qualifying offers have already been extended. Deadline for that is the 19th. We'll go through all of those. We'll check in on some of the transactions that have already happened, including Hendricks going out to the Angels today. We'll check in on the Juan Soto market, and we'll go team by team, breaking down what your team is going to need this offseason to improve their chances next year. Appreciate you guys joining us, and let's get into it. We will start our show today with where we began last year. Last year, the Texas Rangers came in as the World Series champions, but of course they were decimated on the pitching side to begin the year with injuries. Ultimately, though, injuries were the story of their season. They never got out of their own way. Their offense really regressed. And ultimately, the team that I was hoping would ultimately get back to the World Series ultimately did not get there. I thought even around the trade deadline, there was still a possibility if they got everybody back, which it looked like around that time, they were going to get healthy. Well, they just continued to have more injuries, and that offense still did not get back to the levels we saw the year prior. Rangers have some work to do this offseason. That's not the story of the season, though. The story of the season is Shohei Ohtani going to the LA Dodgers. He leaves the LA Angels after, let's just say, a less than successful time there. We've covered that at length as far as what Moreno did there and Perry Manassian, organizational malpractice and all of that kind of thing. But look at the other end of the spectrum, is how successful the Dodgers have been pretty much for the last 10, 15 years now. Now, the big caveat to that is their only World Series championship came in a COVID-shortened season. People questioned whether or not it was a truly legitimate championship. Well, I believe it was, and so this, for those that had questions about how good the Dodgers were, are they another Atlanta Braves team that only was able to climb the mountain once and never get back there again with all their divisional championships, etc.? Are they that type of a team, or are they a once-in-a-generation type of a team, like the Astros, who have multiple championships over the last several years now, or the New York Yankees in years past? Are they that level of team? Well, getting Ohtani, getting Yamamoto, getting Glass now, and all the pieces that they did there still proved to just be enough to be able to overcome the New York Yankees in the World Series, getting them their second World Championship over the last several years. So, really good run there for the Dodgers. They were the class of the league. We thought they would be there at the end of the year, and they were. Braves, we thought were going to be right there as well, but injuries really beset them early in the year. Spencer Strider's injury, Max Fried coming back from injury, how thin they were on the pitching side really was evident all year long. And then, of course, losing Acuna just took the wind out of their sails. They couldn't capture lightning in a bottle like they did all those years ago when Acuna went down the last time. And they basically made trades for 4 different outfielders, basically revamped the entire outfield, and really kind of rolled that momentum all the way to the World Series championship. They were unable to do so this year. So this year's story goes to the LA Dodgers. Just a great job by them being able to overcome the injuries, 1, and 2, having the wherewithal and the patience that they saw last year, where they were willing to take their lumps, maybe not necessarily put their best foot forward to win a championship, but still be very competitive. But they realized they had a real opportunity to get the best player in the sport in Shohei Ohtani. Not only did they add him, they added another great pitcher in Yamamoto. They went out there and made a trade for Glass now as well. Really great organizational year for the LA Dodgers. Welcome in, Willard. Appreciate you coming back. Astros have won 5 World Series and 2 titles and 7 ALCSs in the last 7 playoffs. I couldn't agree with you more there, Willard. Astros are a great team. I just put them in that class of the dynasties that we've seen over the past 20, 25, 30 years now. I put the Astros in that group. I put the Red Sox, I put them in that group as well from the early 2000s. I put the Yankees at the end of the 90s in that group as well. That's kind of the class of the teams we're talking about here. Not just the one-hit wonders. Rangers, as much as I love them, last year proved to be a one-hit wonder. They just really fell on their face last year. We'll see how they rebound this year, but to be a dynasty, you have to continue to have that same level of success year in and year out. And you are correct there, Willard. Astros certainly are a model of excellence on the American League side. Now, questions remain as far as what the Astros are going to do going forward. The questions around Justin Verlander, what are they going to do with Bregman? A whole bunch of other pieces on that team are going to be up for free agency in the next year or two. We'll see what this team looks like opening day. Honestly, I think this team is due for some changes, and their farm system has really kind of performed really well over the past couple of years, even with depleting talent. Now, maybe that's just them squeezing the last drops of the good pieces out of their system. Entirely possible. But I still think that team is still going to be a good contending team. Do I think they're going to be at the level they were at the height of the World Series championship teams? I don't. But I think even Astros fans would have to be kidding themselves to say, hey, this team in 2025 is going to be better than the team that had Correa and Springer, Verlander, etc., Cole. That team was prolific. They've been kind of figuring out how they were going to build forward after that. And they've done a nice job sustaining that level of success, as you said, for the last 7 years. But I just wonder how much longer it's going to last. I think this is probably the last year they'll be in the ALCS. I think the next level of teams coming up are ready to go. We're looking at the Baltimore Orioles being in that discussion. They have to figure out that pitching question, though. That's their biggest priority this offseason. But that's the season that was in 2024. I know a lot of you guys are still coming off of the highs and lows of the 2024 season. I was going to start the videos on Monday, but I was like, the election's coming up. I don't really want to get involved with the politics discussion, as I'm sure would be in the video, and decided to go ahead and hold off until today. We're going to have a long video for you guys today, as we're going to go team by team and really kind of delve down into the numbers, the free agents that are out there, what we could possibly see as far as trades out there as well. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you're new here. We really do appreciate those of you joining us for the first time. And for those of you returning, like Willard here, thank you once again. As always, you can submit your questions via Super Chat here on YouTube. And let's get into it. As you guys know, we like to use the MLB Trade Rumors site as far as if you're looking for a paper site to look at your information if you can't listen to the video or don't have the time or whatever to watch a long content video like this is sure to be. If you just want to check the headlines, that's a great way to do it there. We're going to look at the top 50 free agents first and foremost because it is the hot stove season, and that's kind of where things start. What are the prices on the market right now for the players that are out there, and how in turn does that affect the trade market? I'm expecting a heavier than usual trade market this year. I know every single year, every baseball reporter everywhere says, oh, this year is going to be absolutely crazy. We're going to see more trades, more discussions than we usually see. Well, I do actually think we're going to have more activity this year. Some of the big guns that are in the market this year haven't been in years past. Teams that are just on the cusp of winning need to make big-time acquisitions, both in the free agent game and via the trade market. Teams that have not necessarily lived up to their potential, looking at you, Toronto, might be looking to change things up. And even though they say, Ross Adkins anyway, says they're just, one or two pieces away, he was said specifically in an interview today on Foul Territory, I believe, that not only do they need some bats in that lineup, they need some arms, which of course every team wants to tinker with both sides of it. They need some major additions on both sides there. And so I don't think they're one or two major pieces away. They're not even a Shohei Ohtani away as far as I'm concerned, as far as winning a World Series title. I think that discussion for the Toronto Blue Jays has come and gone. Their core is a lot older now. They need to decide what they want to do with Bo Bichette. Are they going to extend him? Do they try to move him for a big-time package? I don't think you're going to get him at a discount, but there's some big-time discussions that need to be had in a city like Toronto. Other markets like the New York Yankees, New York Mets, always trying to compete for page 6, front page, all that kind of thing. The Mets have Steve Cohen. They really overperformed this year after taking a step back a year ago, selling off Verlander and Scherzer, eating a huge chunk of the money just to retain some, to be able to get a better prospect package back, and great job on them for doing so. They now have the good prospects there that are on the cusp of coming up to the major league level and contributing, and they have the financial wherewithal to make a huge splash in free agency. Of course, they have some big-time free agents of their own that they're going to have to contend with, namely Pete Alonso. We'll see what his market looks like. The market has not been kind to first baseman over the last 5 years or so. We'll see what the market bears for Pete Alonso. It looks like it might be in that $100 million range, 5 years and change range, but we'll see what happens there. Speaking of the first base market, not only are we looking at the free agent market, we're looking at the trade market as well. Rangers have a financial discussion as to what they're going to do with Nathaniel Lowe. He's expected to get around $10 million in arbitration. There is a discussion of Yandy Diaz available from the Tampa Bay Rays and other free agent targets out there like Christian Walker. He would be a great boon for whoever gets him. He was extended a qualifying offer as well. I think a team would have to, really invest some significant money if they're going to go after a Christian Walker. He might be the guy, as far as an all-around player, that I would prefer over a guy like Pete Alonso. I love Pete Alonso. There's no power in the Major League Baseball unlike his. You look at Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Shohei Ohtani. Pete Alonso's power, his bat-to-ball skills as far as being able to hit it for more power than those guys is significantly higher. Not to say that those guys are slouches. It's just that's how prolific of a hitter Pete Alonso can be. One swing of the bat can really change things there. Now, he is a little bit more limited than those other guys as far as on base, as far as speed, those kinds of things. Even defensively, I would say Christian Walker is a little bit better defender at this point in their career than a Pete Alonso. You might have to move Alonso to a DH spot at some point in the next 2 or 3 years, move him off of first base, and then clogging up your spot or your DH spot with a full-time player can be a little bit messy for other teams. So kind of keep those things in mind when you're looking at the free agent market and at the trade market when it comes to first baseman. There's a lot of starting pitchers available this year. Saw the market last year, how it kind of dried up for Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell. Money was not really big. There wasn't a whole lot of money out there. The Dodgers far and away were the biggest spending team. You know who the second place team was? Just wondering. Any of you guys can name who the second place team was as far as spending last year? I'll give you a minute. Any guesses? It's the Kansas City Royals. The Kansas City Royals really invested in their team. They saw an opportunity here with Bobby Witt Jr. and they realized their development process had not worked. So they did a really great job getting low-cost deals when teams are not going out there and buying these free agents. They took advantage of an opportunity in the market and said, hey, we'll take Waka, we'll take Lugo, we'll go ahead and take all of these other guys. And they made a great trade the year before in the Cole Ragans deal, getting him in exchange for Aroldis Chapman. Just great team building there by the Kansas City Royals, both via trade and free agency. They solidified themselves as a contender in the AL Central for at least the next several years, mainly because of Bobby Witt, of course, who they already had as a homegrown talent. But now they've really supplemented their roster, and they have something to look forward to with that roster this year and next year and the year after that. Welcome in, Jordan. Appreciate you joining us once again. Let's go ahead and dig in to the top 50 free agents, shall we? We'll start at the top. That has to be Juan Soto. This is going to be a big-time discussion both in New York, in L.A., the Mets possibly being interested. Maybe his old team in the Nationals has money to spend now. This is going to be a big-time case here in free agency as to how valuable is a player after the deal that Shohei Ohtani got last year. You look at the deal for Shohei last year and just how much money ended up going to Ohtani and how much of it was deferred. That's never going to happen, by the way, for another player. I think Ohtani's a special case. He realizes he could make his money back in advertisements both here domestically and internationally, in his home country as well. He's going to be just fine financially. A guy like Juan Soto isn't going to have those same financial abilities in a market like Japan or China or Australia or anywhere like that. So he's going to be really trying to maximize his overall dollar value with the contract he gets here. Sure, he may get a Gatorade deal, might get a shoe contract as well, but it's going to be nowhere near the advertising money that Shohei Ohtani is able to bring in on his own. So this money is going to be significant. Now, looking back a few years ago when he was a member of the Washington Nationals, Nationals extended him what they thought was a fair offer. Trying to remember what the number was. I want to say it was like 350, 450, somewhere in there. It was a significant number. That's it. 15 years, 440. That was what he originally was offered by the Washington Nationals. That was 3 years ago. And we now live in a very different world where Aaron Judge signed a 9-year, $360 million deal. Shohei Ohtani, because he's a two-way player, got significantly more than that. Welcome in, Tim. Mets will sign Soto to a 14-year deal worth $630 million. Honestly, 5 years ago, I would have looked at you like you're a madman. Now, I would say that isn't necessarily out of the realm of possibility, primarily because of how young Juan Soto is. Now he's one bad knee injury away from being a sunk cost of $630 million. That contract would have to be insured. That would be a big time risk for these teams if they couldn't get that level of contract insured. Based on the youth of Soto, though, I think there should be there should be a willingness by teams to go that far, even no matter how much they're able to get insured of that deal. Looking at that type of a contract specifically, 14 years, it's all about how young Juan Soto is there. They're really trying, a deal like that would really try to capitalize on his years 25 to 30, 31, 32, the years of his prime. That's what, 5, 6, 7 years of the deal? And then you're looking at the final 7 being $300 million for 7 years in a post-prime player. You're really trying to build up those first 7 years, so maybe it's a heavily backloaded deal so you can try to still add talent during those first 7 years. But a team like the Mets, who have endless pockets, it seems, with Steve Cohen as their owner, could be a real possibility here for Soto this winter. Looking at the market for Juan Soto, let's start with his team that he's on this year. Juan Soto is with the New York Yankees, ultimately did not discuss an extension pretty much all year long. I hear the reports out there that sometimes that the number was at least thrown out from the Yankees, and basically Soto said, nah, I'm going to go to free agency. I don't even want to know what the number is. And the Yankees kind of saw the writing on the wall that he's going to go to the highest bidder this winter. And the Yankees very well could be that high bidder, but you saw the numbers where they were already starting to restrict their numbers at last offseason. Now this offseason, they're already trying to go over numbers with Garrett Cole. Cole originally decides to quote-unquote opt out. The team says, I don't know if we're going to pay you the 1 year 36. And then Cole says, never mind, I don't want to opt out. He decides to stay with the Yankees. I'm not saying the Yankees are cheap. I'm not saying that they're financially strapped. But I am saying that they're operating with more thought when it comes to the money that they are investing in the team right now than they ever did in the George Steinbrenner era. And that's just something we haven't seen in Major League Baseball since the Yankees and George Steinbrenner have really been around. Basically, my entire life, anyway, I grew up with the New York Yankees being the evil empire in Major League Baseball. Baseball's always good. Everybody who said when it was Yankees versus Red Sox on Sunday Night Baseball, day after day after day, and it may very well have been for the ratings of ESPN, but you see how the local markets. The TV market has kind of dried up for a lot of the other teams out there. They never really got the exposure of a team like the Yankees or the Red Sox. We can debate that at another time as to how that really affected the markets for those teams, the viability of those teams on a private network all on their own. But as far as it relates to the Yankees and how they're deciding to spend money, it's very different than the way they've ever done it before. And that's really my point here. Are the Yankees really going to go out and do something crazy like you just mentioned there, Tim? 14 for 630. I don't think they would. I think they would say, all right, better man won. I guess they overpay Soto. We'll try to go another way, piecemeal it together. Sure, it sucks losing all those prospects for 1 year of Juan Soto, but hey, we got a World Series run out of it, et cetera, et cetera. That's how they'll try to spin it. And I think the move of Juan Soto and them getting to the World Series really did save Brian Cashman's job. I think if they got bounced in the wild card round, he would have been looking for employment. But as it stands, they got to the World Series. Good on him. I think Cashman's bought himself another few years of leash out there in New York. Let's see what he does with it. If Juan Soto does leave, do they turn to another outfielder on the market? Do they try to save their money and go the trade route? There's a number of different avenues the Yankees can go. It seems like today, at least, the headlines are that they're looking for some relief pitchers first and foremost. Of course, the Soto market's going to take a little bit of time to develop, so understandably, they're trying not to sit on their hands and try to improve their team right now by going out there and adding some relief pitchers. But as far as Soto, Yankees are, of course, in the mix. We talked about the LA Dodgers off the top. The Dodgers, of course, just won the World Series. They are not done adding pieces to this roster. The whole reason Shohei Ohtani deferred money was to try to win and win multiple championships. He wants to go down as probably the greatest player to ever grace a Major League Baseball field. And honestly, he's on the trajectory to do it right now. I know everybody says, hold on, he's only been in the big leagues for 6-7 years. I get it, but we've never seen a two-way player like this. That's kind of a refrain we've been hearing for the last 6-7 years since he came over. Sure, you had Babe Ruth, etc., but we're talking about a guy who's doing it in this level of advanced athleticism rather than in the, a very significantly long period ago time when athleticism wasn't necessarily what it is nowadays. It's a very different time in Major League Baseball. No slight to anybody of those older players anyway, but Shohei Ohtani is just a different animal. He is that good of a player, and the whole reason he deferred that contract was to try to win multiple World Series. This one is not going to be enough to satisfy his thirst for more World Series. So expect them to be in there not just for Juan Soto, but for several of the top flight free agents out there. I would expect them to try to add at least one, probably two starters. I think the run of Clayton Kershaw there in LA is pretty much over at this point. They just can't rely on him to stay healthy anymore. And unless, the Rangers are willing to take him at with their financial constraints, so maybe at a $15 million deal 1 year, take a risk on a guy, maybe that would be the thing for Kershaw. Otherwise, maybe going back to the Dodgers on a low-cost deal might be the last case or the last time we see Clayton Kershaw on a major league field. But Dodgers are going to invest in that rotation. They're going to invest in that lineup. They have Teoscar Hernandez, who's a free agent as well. Should be a very curious market as far as how high that number ultimately gets. New York Mets are going to be in there. We've talked about Steve Cohen's deep pockets. I'm curious to see what else they're going to have in the works there. They got Edwin Diaz back and healthy towards the end of the season. Really started to regain his form. I think they'll still try to add at least one more big-time arm back there in the bullpen. But those are kind of the three big teams I would say in there for Juan Soto. Some dark horses. Everybody likes to throw out there the Texas Rangers just because of how much they've spent in recent years. I don't buy it. I think they've got about $41 million, depending on how you slice it, to spend this free agency period. Maybe they add to that by sending away Nathaniel Lowe, Leody Taveras, John Gray to give themselves a little bit more financial flexibility. They do need to improve that offense. There is no mistaking that. Juan Soto is the best offensive player available at this winter meetings this year. I'm sure they'll at least kick the tires and say, hey, what are you looking at? What numbers are you looking for? But we're probably going to be looking well north of $30 million a year, and I don't think the Rangers have the stomach for another big-time contract with that level of length on it. Sure, DeGrom is going to be entering his third year, and that contract is going to expire in a few years as well, so some of that money is going to be coming off the book soon, but not soon enough. They're trying to trim payroll at the end of last year as well. They're trying to do so again right now and try to stay within $221 million is the number we've seen thrown out there. Right now, they enter free agency around $180 million as an organization. We'll see what they ultimately do. Other team I'd mention is his former teams, the Washington Nationals. They have all this financial flexibility, a great young core, great young pitchers. I'm just not sure he's the right piece at the right time for this team. I think he would quickly elevate them into a wild card contender, but I don't think that necessarily pushes them over the top into a World Series contender. A team like the San Diego Padres absolutely would love to have him back, but there's no way I see him going back there. The Giants, to me, they absolutely have to get some big-time fish to come in there. He would be the perfect fit. We talked for years now about how they really haven't had anybody since Barry Bonds, anyway, as a threat in that lineup to really make the other team quiver, go, hey, maybe we should pitch around this guy. Maybe we should at least worry about the validity of this lineup. Bringing in Juan Soto would really solidify what this Giants team has been through the last 5-6 years. Swing and miss, swing and miss, swing and miss after big, high-profile free agent after high-profile free agent. They need to swing and connect on one. And hopefully it's Juan Soto for them. If not, I can already hear the Bay Area rumbling about how they're not going to sign anybody, how they always give the worst contracts out there. We'll see what ultimately happens here, but I'm curious to see, how far they're willing to go for Juan Soto. Maybe they outbid everybody and Soto goes somewhere else. That'd be really telling about what other Major League players think about the San Francisco Giants. Alrighty. Let's move on to player number 2. That's going to be Corbin Burnes. Corbin Burnes probably the best free agent starter on the market. Depends on how you feel about Max Fried. But for my money, Burnes is the best arm available at this winter meetings this year. 7 years, 200 is the guesstimation anyway by MLB Trade Rumors. They got picks down like the Red Sox and Mets. I absolutely believe both of those teams are going to add significant payroll this offseason. I think both of those teams are going to add significant starting pitchers. However, there is the conversation to be had about the Baltimore Orioles. They didn't get the job done this year when he was on the roster. Maybe they see it as, maybe we're better off going without and just move on from the sunk cost there. We've seen that happen before with the Flaherty deal, how they decided just to move on, and how Flaherty really performed well. Uh, after leaving the Orioles, went on to the Tigers, pitched well, went on to the Dodgers, won a championship this year. I'm curious to see what the number ultimately looks like for Burns, though. I think he's probably in the top 10 starting pitchers in the game right now. Do I think he's top 5? There could be an argument to be had for that, but I still think there's significant gap between him and, say, the top 2 or 3 guys. Burns is still a very good pitcher. I think the desperation of teams to get some high-level starters in there is really going to drive the market on this one. So 7 for 200, I think, is actually a little bit low. If I'm looking at it, the market right now, and I'm Corbin Burns, I think 7-210 is very attainable. You look at the DeGrom money that he got. You look at the deal Robbie Ray signed years ago. You look at the deals that we've seen signed since. Blake Snell is going to get significant money this year. There's going to be a market for Corbin Burns at $30 million a year. There could even be a market for Corbin Burns at $33 million a year. I wouldn't be surprised if this gets up to the 7 for 230, 7 for 225 range. Maybe modeling it after the Marcus Semien contract. I know 2 very different players, but I could see him going for that level of a contract. The length of 7 years does sound about right, though. But I think 200 is a little bit light. Other teams that could be in the mix is literally any team that needs some starting pitching and has the financial wherewithal to get a deal done. We talked about the Dodgers being out there for a guy like Juan Soto. Corbin Burns would absolutely help their rotation. You're going to look at a rotation next year as long as Ohtani is healthy. He played with a torn labrum at the end of the World Series anyway, coming off of a Tommy John. He's got some injury issues of his own. Glasnow as well. They got Glasnow, Yamamoto. Ohtani is probably your 1, 2, 3 in that rotation, however you stack it up. Walker Buehler is in that discussion as well. A guy like Corbin Burns would be another highlight reel arm to bring in for that rotation. And I think it'd be exactly up the alley for the Dodgers to be able to get a deal like that done. Now, I keep bringing up the Dodgers over and over and over again, but you look at the money that team has already spent on Shohei Ohtani and how it's deferred. They got the ability to really build a true dynasty, not just win multiple over a course of 5 or 6 years, but win multiple in a row over the course of 5 or 6 years. I know a lot of teams don't want to hear that. Astros, they've been in the ALCS for 7 straight years. They know how hard it is to win a World Series year after year after year. They haven't been able to do it, but they're still a dynasty level of team. A team like the Dodgers, I think, has the financial wherewithal to go out there and possibly get this thing done, winning back-to-back World Series, a thing we haven't seen in a very long time. So that's your number 2, Corbin Burns. Number 3, Alex Bregman. Now, for me, this isn't my number 3. Alex Bregman, for me, is closer around that 10 mark. I just think his numbers haven't been enough to justify the contract that he's going to get. I understand World Series pedigree, all that kind of thing, but to me, this is a player who hasn't played up to his potential the last couple of years now. We've seen a little bit of stumbles. You think about Bo Bichette's bad start to the year this year, his down year. Bregman's wasn't quite at that level this year, but to me, there's still more to be had in a guy like Bregman. And sure, maybe you're betting on that. Maybe that's why you're paying him the higher dollar in free agency, because he's capable of doing better. But we have to see it on the field. And I'm not going to pay for a performance that I haven't seen and can't see going forward. I want to see the performance on the field before I buy, and then I want to see that performance continue, and I just don't see it with a guy like Bregman. Now, 7 years, 182, I figure that's pretty close to the money he's going to get. He has the defensive versatility to play pretty much all over the infield. I imagine if a team is already stacked in the infield, they could throw him in a corner if they wanted to. But I think he's probably going to be a shortstop, third base, second base type of a player for whoever he ultimately goes to. Their predictions have teams like the Blue Jays, Astros, and Mariners for a guy like Bregman. Mariners need to step up their game and bring in a bat. Bregman would fit the bill here, would be a significant upgrade for them at third base. I don't think that the money is going to be there, though, for the Mariners to be able to come out on top in this one. Astros, I think, are going to be right there. I think the money could be a significant hindrance, though. We've seen that owner Jim Crane wants to, kind of keep his guys at the number that he has in his mind, not necessarily what the market dictates. And I think Bregman is actually going to perform better than what he should in this market. And so I think the Astros could be priced out on this one. Blue Jays, if they decide not to sell this offseason and at the winter meetings, they could be a team that really makes a play here. They saw the hole at third base after they lost Matt Chapman anyway to the San Francisco Giants. Not that Chapman is on the level of a guy like Bregman, but you see the money that Chapman just got in an extension with the Giants earlier a few months ago. Bregman is a significantly better player than him, has a higher offensive ceiling as well, and so that would be a great fit there if the Blue Jays decide to make one last hurrah at this thing, and they've shown a wherewithal to be willing to spend money on Astros players who don't seem to be either in their prime or at least performing at the level that they should. Looking at George Springer, he was already entering age 30 season or so. I'm trying to remember how old George Springer was when they signed him, but there was very few years of prime production left on the deal that he signed when the Blue Jays went out there and acquired him. They thought he'd be a great fit into that clubhouse. They could transition him into a right field role, which they have, and we'll see which direction the Blue Jays go, but I think they're a team absolutely in the mix here. Other teams, pretty much any team in the market for a high-level third baseman, shortstop, or a second baseman, those would be the teams I would be keeping an eye on. But the Blue Jays, to me, seem like a real dark horse. Well, I wouldn't even say dark horse. A real threat for the Astros to be able to sign him. Number 4 on their list is Blake Snell. Now, for me, just the level of consistency that we're starting to see from Blake Snell is enough for me to justify the 5-year 160 comp here. Corbin Burns, I had around 7 for 210. 5 for 160 sounds a little high when you look at the 7-year commitment for Burns, but for 5 years and the consistency starting to show year over year for Blake Snell, that gives me a little bit more hope that maybe, just maybe, he's a little less volatile than he was in his time with the Rays. Even his former employers are all looking to bring him back. The Padres have said to be interested. The Giants are interested in the market as well. I think there's so many teams out there in need of starting pitching. There's been some discussion even about the Texas Rangers, even with their cash being strapped a little bit, that they could be a team that's in the mix for a Blake Snell. Just because of, the Rangers seem to value pitching, and they'll spend on pitching before they do hitting. We've seen that year in and year out over the last 3 years now. But with the Red Sox being in the market there, the Mets being in the market, Dodgers are in there. I'd imagine the Yankees are once again going to pick up the phone. Twins really pared down their payroll last year. They could be a team that if they move off some salaries could be a nice fit there. They could be a dark horse, quote-unquote, team for him. Cardinals make some sense. But for me, I think it's going to be one of those big 3 teams. Talking about the Mets, the Red Sox, and the Dodgers. This might be the player that the Red Sox ultimately turn to, experience in the AL East, etc., etc. He would be a great fit there. Number 5, Willy Adames. There was some discussion about him moving off of shortstop today in order to be more appealing to other teams willing to sign him. I don't think he has to. I think there's a number of teams out there that could use an improvement at the shortstop position. 6 for 160. I'm not going to quibble too much on the number there. I think his market could be a little under or a little over. 6 for 160 is a safe bet as far as I'm concerned. Giants do seem like a good fit here. He seems like the level of free agent that they've seemed to have success with, kind of overpaying a guy that's not necessarily at the top of the market, but is still seen as a blue chip type of player on the market that they really have to hit in order for them to have some success. Now, Juan Soto is the pie in the sky, but Willy Adames could be a lot more attractive to them because of the cost, of course, and the signability of a guy like Willy Adames versus a Juan Soto. You're going to have so much more stiff competition for Soto than you would for Adames. Giants, pretty much it's a clean sweep here that they believe that Adames would be a great fit there. I would be of the same mindset there, but other teams could use him. If the Blue Jays move off of Bichette, there's an opening there. There's always the possibility he goes back to the Brewers, but I don't think there's any world in which he goes back there because of the money issues. Rays have shown a willingness to spend money over the last couple of years. We saw them be a finalist for Freddie Freeman a few years ago. They had that same deal that the Dodgers had on the table for him. I would be shocked if they did that for Willy Adames, but after the Wander Franco fiasco anyway, maybe they're willing to invest in that team a little bit, but I don't think they'll be willing to spend at that level for a player at shortstop when they already have some pieces coming up to replace that position. But I'm curious where he could go. The Yankees always seem to be in the mix for every big name. I'm sure every big name team is going to check in on the market, see if there's an opportunity. But I do agree with pretty much everybody here that the Giants seem like the most realistic fit for Willy Adames. Moving on to number 6. Now, this is the free agency case. I'm probably one of the more curious cases, for me anyway, from an injury perspective, from a talent perspective as well. Fried has shown the ability to be a very high-level pitcher. I'm just curious how much he has left in the tank. Injuries, I wonder how many more years of high-level production he has left. If they're going to take an even bigger toll on him going forward. And what does his career look like for the next 3 to 5 years? In that case, I'd probably move off of the 6-year commitment for a guy like Max Fried, but maybe that 6 years required to get a deal done. 6 years, 156 is their comp here for what a contract could look like for him. Cubs seem to be one of the teams that like Braves players, and the Cubs seem to be, what these pundits anyway believe is going to happen. Dodgers, I would say, are in the mix. But for me, I would be more curious if I'm a team looking to acquire him. What's the state of his health? What does the arm look like? What is he going to look like in 2 or 3 years from now? Are the numbers that you're seeing over the last couple of years what you're going to continue to see? Are you going to see some improvement or decline from those? For Fried, I think that's a little bit more volatile, especially when you consider a guy like Corbin Burnes and Blake Snell. Those guys seem to be a little bit less volatile, especially Burnes. Snell's starting to become less volatile year over year. But for Fried, I just worry about the injury bug. We saw the injury bug questions around Jacob deGrom when he hit free agency. Not saying Fried is Jacob deGrom on the injury level or as far as talent. I think deGrom's a better pitcher and had bigger injury question marks. And we saw the deal that the Rangers were willing to go out there and give him. 2 years longer than anybody else on the market, significantly more money than anybody else on the market, and that got the deal done. I don't think there's a team out there this year that's at that level of desperation to add a number one type of starter. Max Fried, I think, at his best, is in a best case scenario for Max Fried, for him, would be as a number two. I think he'd be a great number two behind a guy like Garrett Cole in New York. I think if you're asking him to be the frontline starting pitcher in your rotation, I think your rotation's probably a little bit weak. Not that Fried doesn't have the talent for it. I think he does. But I think the injury question marks alone would lead me to question whether or not you have enough pitching if he's your ace on your staff. Dodgers are another team that they mention here as a possibility. I think Red Sox could be a really good fit here. They have been a little bit shy on pitching over the last couple of years. They got some good performances this year out of some of their names that aren't necessarily known around Major League Baseball. They got some good production out of those guys. I wonder if they continue with that homegrown thought and add maybe one big centerpiece like Fried to headline this rotation going into next year. Really kind of get the ball rolling for them. They do have a little bit of work to do as far as that bullpen goes as well. Number 7, Pete Alonso. We already talked a little bit about the first base market, how it looks on the free agent market, both in the trade market as well. 5 years, 125. That seems a little rich as far as what the first base market has been looking at the last several years. But again, the best power on the market is Pete Alonso. There is no questioning that. Now, the ups and downs of the Mets team kind of coincide with the ups and downs of Pete Alonso's bat. When he's on, he's on. When he's off, he's off. When he's not, or when the rest of the lineup isn't producing, rest of the league can really pitch around a guy like Pete Alonso and not have to worry about him. That sets off bad habits in Pete Alonso's swing, and then you lose him for months at a time with effectiveness. But again, power is power, and teams really do pay for that home run power. Now, do they pay at 5 years, 125? That might be a little bit rich, but teams here looking to try to improve their floor. A team like the Angels could look here. A team like the Nationals could be a team that looks here. Rangers are looking at first baseman. They were at the trade deadline. They got some nice production this year, towards the end of the season anyway, from Nathaniel Lowe. But do they continue to value Nathaniel Lowe at that level when you're going to pay him $10 million? Do they trade him? And then, of course, you have to deal with the Christian Walker effect. To me, I would rather invest the money in a guy like Christian Walker than a guy like Pete Alonso, but we shall see. Then you have, of course, the Steve Cohen effect. Our team's going to be, chilled on the fact that, hey, Steve Cohen's just going to outbid me. Am I just going to be bidding against myself if Cohen's just trying to drop the player on me? There's all kinds of discussions to be had around that point, but for my money, Pete Alonso, 5 years, 125, that seems a little rich. I'd be looking 5 for 110, 5 for 108, somewhere in that range if I'm one of these teams looking to bring him in, just because I think from a payroll perspective, he's a one-trick pony as far as at the plate. Power. On-base percentage as far as walks can help him as well. Back-to-ball skills aren't necessarily at the level of Soto, Judge, Ohtani, and you're asking me to pay him 25 $30 million a year. I don't necessarily see that market, but I could see easily a little bit north of 20 for whoever ultimately brings him in. Nationals for three of the pundits here, Mets for another one. I would say the Mets are still probably the most likely team for him. I just don't see Cohen giving up on the first baseman, especially when there's not really one out there. I see them bringing in. Of course, they could make a trade for Vlad Guerrero Jr. or a Yandy Diaz, Nathaniel Lowe, bring in Christian Walker, but I think they'd rather have the power in that lineup of a Pete Alonso. He really fits that New York market, so if I'm predicting it, I would say Pete Alonso back to the Mets. Number 8, Jack Flaherty. He signed a one-year deal last year. Obviously overperformed that. Now the question is, are these numbers that he's been putting up the last couple of years the real Jack Flaherty? Has he finally learned how to put together consistent years? Or is the Jack Flaherty that we saw towards the end of his time with the St. Louis Cardinals the one that's going to come back around? 5 years, 115. I think that's about right for his market. Teams are pretty much anybody who needs some starting pitching. I think teams that are on the periphery of that starting pitching market could turn to Jack Flaherty first in hopes of bringing him in. You look at teams like the Angels who need some starting pitching. Tigers are looking to improve their rotation. He was just there as well. Dodgers, of course, are at the top of the market for teams that are looking for some starting pitching, along with the New York Yankees. Yankees, I think they've got a really good 1 through 4. I think the 5th spot in their rotation could use some improvement, but I think they have enough guys there where a Jack Flaherty I don't think is that big of an improvement for them. I would say Flaherty is not a likely fit for New York. If I'm in the sweepstakes for Flaherty, though, 5 for 115 sounds about right. I'll handicap it and say a team like the Angels makes a lot of sense here. They just brought in Kyle Hendricks today, 1 year, $3 million deal. Good deal for both sides. I think Hendricks is a little bit older of a player, can kind of shepherd the young starting pitchers that are going to be coming through the ranks here for the Angels next year or so. And, maybe they'll just catch lightning in a bottle. Hendricks, catches on before the trade deadline, and they jettison him somewhere and build with the pieces that they get for him. Angels are not going to be a contending team for the next couple of years. So, unless they want to, go out there and spend money on a guy like Jack Flaherty, the signings of a guy like Hendricks make a lot of sense. Number 9, Anthony Santander, 4 years, $80 million. Kind of not really a utility player, but a useful player for a team that really struggled before Adley Rutschman got there, before the rest of the crew, Gunnar Henderson, Jackson Holiday coming, etc. Before that crew comes in, Santander was kind of the one guy that was holding it down for a few minutes there. I think there's a chance he goes back to the Orioles as kind of the glue guy, veteran of the group, etc. But I think there's enough teams out there that need some offensive improvement that might be able to outbid a team like the Orioles, who are still trying to manage their money a little bit better than, and just rather than just spend it on whoever's on their own team, bringing them back, keeping the core together. I think they're looking to improve their roster and pinch a few pennies along the way. So I think they're going to try to invest that money in starting pitching before they bring a guy like Anthony Santander back. So if they bring back Burns and then Santander is still sitting out there, 4 for 60 might make some sense for the Orioles. I don't think he'll sign that type of a deal, but that would be a team-friendly deal that I think the Orioles would be comfortable with. Outside of that, Blue Jays, if they're looking to improve their offense a little bit, Giants, this seems like the Giants type of player, a good, solid player, highly thought of elsewhere, not necessarily the top flight free agent, but as a consolation prize for missing out on Juan Soto, Santander makes some sense. Royals make some sense. They spent some money last year. Maybe they spend some more this year. Not sure a bat like Santander is where they would put it. I think they would still try to put it on pitching first, but could be a fit. Number 10 for them is Sean Manaea, 3 years, $60 million. I'm not sure if they have Nate Eovaldi on this list. I think once you get into the Sean Manaeas of the world, we're starting to forget some of the free agents that are going to be out there that have performed at a better clip in their career, rather than the one-hit wonder this year in Sean Manaea. 3 for 60. $20 million a year seems to be about the going rate for a competent starting pitcher in the major league level. Now, as far as the years, because he only showed 1 year of proven track record here, before that, some up and down performances. You look back at his Oakland days where he was much better. Maybe he's getting back to that form. Maybe he found something, discovered something about himself this year, but that's why he's getting the $20 million a year now. Now he has to go out there and prove that he can continue to build off of the year that he just had. Mets are a good fit there. I think that they need to bring back some continuity in that starting rotation. You can't go out there and buy the best free agents from every team. You're going to have to retain some of your own. And they did a great job of that last year, bringing back pretty much all of their top flight free agents. Cubs are a team that are in the market for some starting pitching. They just lost Hendricks out of that rotation. They don't really have much to speak of coming on that rotation side. I don't see too much, in the offing for them. So a guy like Manaea could be a good filler for them until they get their next wave of pitchers coming. Tigers, they lost Jack Flaherty in the middle of the season. Maybe he's the fit in that rotation for them. Kenta Maeda's signing didn't exactly work out the way they had hoped. But the Tigers were better this year. I think with a signing of Manaea, they'd be even better next year as well. And then, of course, the Mets. Number 11, Teoscar Hernandez, fresh off of his World Series championship season. Everybody thought he was kind of on the backslide a little bit. Numbers in Toronto were starting to decline this year. And then we saw the time with the Mariners. Got the one-year deal with the Mariners this past offseason. And now is going to parlay that into a multi-year deal. Dodgers, I think, are a great fit there. He seems to just really fit in. And he's one of the few players on that team that really got buddy-buddy with Shohei Ohtani as well. I could really see him going back there. Teams that need corner outfield help also should be of interest. Tigers make some sense, according to the pundits here, along with the Reds and Royals. I could always say Dodgers for pretty much every single one of these players as far as a prediction for where they could go. But I think Teoscar Hernandez is probably the most likely guy to be brought back on that team because of that connection to Ohtani and how successful he was there in LA. The Jordan Hayward contract obviously didn't work out for them this year. I think they view Teoscar Hernandez a little bit more valuable to them than what they saw in Jason Hayward this past offseason. And I think they should be able to get a deal done. 3 for $60 sounds about right. Number 12, Yusei Kikuchi. Now we saw the trade this past trade deadline. Kikuchi going from the Blue Jays to the Astros. Everybody panned the trade at the time. Kikuchi since went out and performed very well for the Astros. But for me, is he a number 1 in your rotation? No. Is he a number 2 in your rotation? No. At times, he is a 3. He's usually a 4. And when he's bad, he's a 5 or shouldn't be in your rotation. Now, we just said a few minutes ago that the going rate for a competent major league pitcher, a number 3, 4 type starter, is around $15 to $20 million. This contract falls within that 3 for $60. I'm just not willing to pay for it, but teams are that desperate for starting pitching, and he was good down the stretch there for the Astros. Now, do teams look at the run up to the trade deadline and just chalk it up to, he just was worried about the trade deadline, where he was going to go, that's why he underperformed? Or do they look at the second half and say, hey, this performance that we see on the field was significantly better. Is it going to continue to grow? Or is this just a blip? Is he finally going to go back to being the number 3, 4 type starter that we've seen all his career? Or is he going to even backslide further to a number 5? A lot of volatility with a guy like Kikuchi here, which is why I don't see the market being at the $60 million range. I think he's a competent major league pitcher, but I think teams are going to be a little bit leery of that. And so I think 2 years, $40 million is probably where teams are going to hope for it to get. If the Kikuchi market goes to a third year, I think we could see around $50 million, $55 million for a guy like Kikuchi. Because again, I don't see him as a number 1. I don't see him as a number 2. And honestly, on a playoff team, I don't see him taking the ball in Game 3 of the World Series. So, for me, if he's on a contending team, he's probably your number 4 or 5 starter. If he's on a rebuilding club, a team that needs to eat innings, etc., then maybe you justify the expense there and say, hey, we'll give you the third year, but you got to go at 55 mil total. Something along those lines. But I think the 60 is a little bit rich there for him. The MLB Trade Rumors describes him as mercurial. That's one way to put it. Now, Christian Walker, we just saw Pete Alonso, the prediction for him. 5 years, 125. Christian Walker, 3 for $60. To me, this has Astros written all over it. They were hot on his heels around the trade deadline. I think the market for him, if he is around 3 for $60, that is a pipe dream for the Astros to be able to get him there. But if they do get it done for that money, that would be probably the signing of the offseason as far as value and the player that you get for the money that you're spending. Teams that are in the market for first base obviously are going to check in here. But 3 for 60 for Christian Walker, who really improved his offense this past season as well. I really like him. He's an ascending player. There's not too many players who hit free agency that are ascending still. Soto is one of those cases. But for me, I really like Christian Walker here. Diamondbacks obviously want to bring him back. 3 for 60. If you let him walk for that after you just signed Jordan Montgomery to that 2-year deal anyway, that's going to be a really bad look for the organization. That's a team that's looking to get off of that money, by the way. So we'll see where they do or what they ultimately do with Jordan Montgomery. But Christian Walker, 3 for 60, that seems a little light. I think we're probably going to be looking in the neighborhood of probably 4 years, 80, 85 million. I think the first base market, like I said earlier, doesn't really get above $25 million a year. But around that $20 million mark for a high-end player is about what you can expect on the market. And I think because of the defensive abilities of a guy like Christian Walker, clubhouse leadership, and how he really improved his offensive profile this year, I think elevates him above that $20 million threshold. I'm going to say 4 for 85, and I do think the Astros are the most likely team for him along with the Diamondbacks. Now, other teams that are going to check in on his market, pretty much everybody in the Alonso market there. Looking at the Toronto Blue Jays, if they move off of Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Rangers could be in the market here. They were interested in Yandy Diaz at the trade deadline. If they're going to get an improvement over Nathaniel Lowe, he might be the best one in free agency, not named Pete Alonso, to do so. Let's go ahead and go on to number 15, or 14 anyway. Tanner Scott, 4 for 56. Relief pitchers are going to be in demand. I do think the Yankees are going to spend money on some free agent relievers. Not even, in a few weeks at the winter meetings. I think they're going to do so, within the week or two. Guys like Kirby Yates, who had good years last year for the Texas Rangers, Robertson as well. Some guys who have some ninth inning experience are really going to be a little bit more valuable on the market, much like they are every year. Guys who can close games always seem to have a little bit more value. But for me, Tanner Scott, 4 for 56, sounds about right. I would say the Yankees, for me, I would really like to bring him in if I'm the Yankees. Red Sox need to rebuild that bullpen a little bit. Blue Jays, of course, they sent away half their bullpen at the trade deadline. Red Sox, another guess here by one of the pundits there. I think any team out there, like, for instance, the Orioles, they tried to go with Craig Kimbrell last year. That didn't work out. I think they could be in the market for a guy like Tanner Scott. I think the Phillies could be in that market as well. But for me, I'll handicap it and say the Yankees ultimately get that deal done. 15, Luis Severino, 3 for 51. He really performed well with the Mets. I expected him to go back to the Mets. He has a connection to the manager there in Mendoza. 3 for 51 sounds about right. Mets aren't overpaying necessarily. That seems like a fair deal for a pitcher who was good for them last year. 16, Jurickson Profar. What a change Jurickson Profar has been going through his entire career. Number one prospect, ended up being traded to Oakland for a package of players. Bounced around a little bit, finally finds a home in San Diego, performs well, ultimately to get a 1-year deal with the Rockies, only to wind up back in San Diego again after underperforming. Ends up as their leadoff guy in the playoffs for a period of time. What a roller coaster of a career Jurickson Profar has had. Speaking as a Rangers fan, I really loved watching your Jurickson Profar play when he was with the Rangers and just seeing him finally get the credit that he is due as a player. We saw him play on the World Baseball Classic stage for Team Netherlands. Really versatile type player, infield, outfield nowadays. I think that hurt him early on in his career. He really never really elevated to, like the premier starting shortstop on a team because there was already a shortstop on the teams that he was on. Never really developed into a premium left fielder because they would always bounce him around for a day off at short or a day off for somebody at third. And I think that really held him back from the potential we could have seen for Profar. So I was really happy to see him finally get some of that credit, national spotlight on him over the playoff runs and how successful he was this past season for the Padres. 3 for 45. Honestly, as much as I'd love to say it's a great offer, a great deal for a player, I think it's honestly a little rich. Speaking as a team who needs some offense, who could use a defensively versatile player, the Texas Rangers anyway is who I'm speaking of. They would love to bring back a player like Jurickson Profar, but they're not going to be able to spend $15 million a year when they have roughly $40 to spend to bring back Nathan Eovaldi and a few other players, rebuild that bullpen. They really need to focus on that bullpen this offseason as well. I just think 3 for 45 is a little rich. and how many teams are out there going, hey, Jurickson Profar is the answer to our problems. But I do think a 3-year deal does sound about right for Profar, but I think we're probably looking in the neighborhood of $30-40 million at most. 45, I think, would be a little bit rich, as much as I love the player. But Padres make some sense. Royals make some sense. If I'm guessing, I would say the Padres find a way to bring him back based on how good he's been for them over the past several years. All right, number 17 on this list, and honestly, why he's number 17, I do not know. The guy is absolutely nails. I mean, if you're looking for a guy for your rotation, your younger pitchers, your younger players on your roster to model their career after, look no further than Nathan Eovaldi. That dude comes to bat for his players. He comes to bat to coach them up. You know, on his off day, he'll come up and watch a bullpen session for a no-name minor league kid who just wants to get some eyeballs on him and see how he can improve. We saw him do that time and time again for the Rangers this year. Jacob deGrom, while he was injured, did the same thing. Those guys really helped elevate some of the pitchers in the Rangers minor league system. And we'll see if the performance gets a little bit better this next season with those young arms. But, boy, the leadership qualities of a Nathan Eovaldi, wow. 17 on this list. Now let's go to on the field. What does the performance look like? I mean, he just was a number one horse for you going on a team that won a World Series along with Jordan Montgomery. Now, we saw how Montgomery played this year. I'm going to chalk a lot of this up to how things didn't really fit in Arizona and how long he was on the table in free agency. I'm going to chalk that up as just one really bad year. I think getting out of that Arizona situation and into somewhere better early in free agency, early in this offseason window, is going to be the best case scenario for him. Just get away from that toxic situation. And I think he probably gets back to 3.25 pitcher, somewhere in that range, 3.24 or 3.42, somewhere in there. Sub 4 ERA guy is what I think Jordan Montgomery could become, which is why I think teams that are looking to acquire him might not find a offer that they're liking from the Diamondbacks based on how little they're going to be willing to eat on a player who just was a number one horse, along with Nathan Eovaldi for the Rangers, who just won a World Series. Now, as it relates to Nathan Eovaldi, his performance did not dip last year. Sure, he had a little bit of injury. We saw that the year before as well. He's always had injury issues. But when he takes the ball, he's highly effective. Now, the home run numbers are a little bit worrying, especially in a pitcher, yes, I said it, pitcher-friendly ballpark in Texas. Now, 2 years, $44 million. I think this could be a very fair deal for both sides. But as far as the ranking here, I think his impact is going to be so much higher than the other 16 guys on this list. I really like Nathan Eovaldi as a player. Rangers are probably going to bring him back if they can. I saw multiple pundits out there quoting around $25 million a year for a guy like Nathan Eovaldi. 2 for 44 maybe fits that same realm. But I think a reunion with Texas is probably the most likely thing. We said a few years ago when he was a free agent of the Red Sox, a reunion with the Red Sox after winning the World Series is probably the thing for him. But I think he's a little bit more tied to the community. Not that he wasn't in Boston. I just think he's found a real home here down in Texas. I think getting a 2-year $50, 2-year $44 million deal sounds about right. And just gives the Rangers just enough time to continue to develop those young arms that they've been bringing along. Kumar Rocker looks like he's going to be at the Major League level next year. Jack Leiter's going to be there at some point, whether it be in the bullpen or in that rotation. They got some good young arms coming, but they need some veteran leadership at the top of that rotation. They're going to have deGrom, but he's coming off of a Tommy John. Pitched a little bit at the end of the year. Looked great, but they're going to have him on a little bit of a pitch count, I would think, for the majority of next season, trying to keep him healthy for a postseason run. But Nathan Eovaldi would be a great number 2 in the Rangers rotation. They have John Gray still there. They're looking at possibly bringing back Andrew Heaney as well. He was absolutely money for the Rangers this year. He was the Rangers' most valuable pitcher in my estimation. His contract's going to be a little bit richer than what he originally signed for with the Rangers, 2 for 25. I think you're probably going to be looking around 3 for 50 deal, maybe a 3 for 60 deal for a guy like Andrew Heaney. He really elevated himself this past season, how versatile he was. The stuff really played up, especially when you saw it in the postseason. He might not have been able to give you like 6-7 innings of that stuff, but that stuff for 4 or 5 innings in the postseason, in their World Series runs, you saw how well that played and how well the Rangers were able to utilize the pitchers who had that level of stuff. They weren't necessarily looking for length in the postseason. During the regular season, they got the length that they were looking for out of him. So a guy like Andrew Heaney, Nathan Eovaldi, I view very similarly. I would say Nathan Eovaldi just a little bit above that. 2 years, 44, though, does sound about right. Teams that could be in the market for him besides the Rangers. Looking at teams that need starting pitchers, Cubs absolutely could use a pitcher like this. He would be their frontline starter to me right now, day one. Sorry to the pitchers that are already there, but I think Nathan Eovaldi is that good of a player, that good of a pitcher still, performance, and then, of course, the leadership intangibles he brings. Teams like the Giants could really use something like that, but they already have Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, etc. Yankees could use another starter there, but I don't see that happening. But I do think the Rangers make a lot of sense here. They seem to really want to get that deal done and then try to figure out the offense with whatever's left. So if they spend, say, $25 a year on Eovaldi, that leaves them roughly $15 million to spend on catcher, relief pitching, and an offensive bat. It'd be the biggest chunk that they spend this offseason, sure. But I think that would be the most impactful thing they could do to impact the roster for next season. So I'm going to go ahead and pencil in the Rangers for Eovaldi going back. Hoffman, 4 for 44, performed well, all-star last year, struggled in the postseason, but he's going to get a nice penny in free agency. All the teams that need some free agency, some relief pitching out there, Blue Jays, Red Sox, Yankees, A's, Angels, all make sense here. A's, I don't think are going to be a team that's looking to necessarily pare down their roster like they have been the last several years. We got the GM on the books already saying we're not trading away a guy like Brent Rooker. I thought the time to trade him was at the trade deadline last year. If they were going to trade him at all, they chose to hang on to him and keep this offensive core together. The offense certainly looked very good in the second half of the year. Now the question becomes, are they going to improve that pitching staff? After you saw the improvements the Royals made, adding a few pieces like a Jeff Hoffman to their roster, somebody who has some starting experience, some bullpen experience. Maybe they envision him like the next Seth Lugo, bring him back into the starting rotation there. I don't think he'll be as successful as Lugo. However, I think Lugo is a special case and should not be seen as the norm, but rather as the outlier. It does not usually work. Ronaldo Lopez, another one that worked well in the rotation, but he was also another former starter. So 4 years, 44, I think it's very attainable. I think we're probably looking more 4 for 36. Maybe 44 is the high end of his market, I will say. Blue Jays make some sense. They have to add somebody in that bullpen. Red Sox, again, we've already talked about their need for some bullpen help. And the Angels, they just need talent, period. And then, of course, if they're adding this type of a player, though, I don't think he necessarily fits their timeline. I think what they did last year, having a whole bunch of older arms in that bullpen that they could then trade away at the deadline, I thought they should have done a better job trading away more pieces out of that bullpen. But I think going that route once again is their best course of action to try to rebuild this team by bringing in trade assets, players on 1 year type of deals, 1 year, $3 million deal that you can easily flip at the deadline if they're having a good year. I think that's a better way to go if I'm in the Angels front office than a 4-year commitment to a guy like Jeff Hoffman. Alrighty, Tyler O'Neill, corner outfielder, 3 for 42. We'll wrap up the top 20 here, and then we'll get on to some of the team needs here. But 3 for 42, Orioles could use some outfield help, sure. But I think they still want to keep their core together. Giants here, Pirates. Pirates to me make a lot of sense. I like that they have that one. The Mariners could make some sense as a corner outfield team as well. But I'm going to go ahead and say the Pirates are a good fit here. They were looking to improve their offense at the end of last year. They have the pitching staff coming. They could use another bullpen arm as well. Tyler O'Neill, though, I think fits the profile of the player they're looking for to improve their offense. Now, can he, get back to some of the numbers that we've seen him produce in his younger years when he was with the Cardinals? Possibly. But I think he's at a 3-year investment here. It doesn't necessarily hurt them in the long run. They're a small market team. This is the type of player that you can take a gamble on and it not kill them for 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. All right, to round out the top 20, we got Gleyber Torres, 2 years, $36 million. I don't think there's any way he goes back to the Yankees. Teams that need some offense, second base, shortstop, third base, utility infielder type of a player. Um, should be making a call on Torres. Royals need some offense, makes some sense. Mariners need some offense, makes some sense. But they're in the market for some of the NPB players coming over as well. Royals make some sense again because of the offense issue. I'm not going to handicap this one. I do think there's so many teams that could use him pretty much anywhere. Right field, left field, second, third, short, first base on a pinch, DH. I just think pretty much every team could use a player like Gleyber Torres. 2 years, 36 seems a little bit rich. I think the offense isn't necessarily as high as a guy like, say, Jock Peterson when he got a 1 year, $20 million deal, the qualifying offer, etc. But the defense is a little bit better, I would say, than Jock Peterson. But to be around that same evaluation point anyway, 1 for 22 for 18, that's a little rich for me. So if I'm in the market for a guy like Gleyber Torres, I'm looking more in the 2 for 25 range rather than the 2 for 36 range. So I know some teams are already going to be balking at that because the price tag. Rangers, need to cut back on payroll. There are a lot of teams out there trying to get back under that tax threshold and save some money for their owners. I know as baseball fans, we like to go out there and spend and spend and spend, but it's not our money to spend. So we shall see what happens. I'll give you a bonus one just because. That's going to be Clay Holmes, 3 for 30. Sounds about right, honestly. Bullpen help. Again, you're going to look at the Yankees here for, they need some bullpen help there. Maybe they bring him back. Teams around pretty much everywhere need bullpen help. Rangers are going to be looking for another arm in that bullpen. Say they do Eovaldi, they're going to need somebody to close some games for them. Kirby Yates was nails for them this past year. Maybe they bring him back 2 for 18, 3 for 36, something like that. Or 3 for 27 anyway would be Kirby Yates. David Robinson had a really nice year for them as well. There's so many relief arms that are in that Clay Holmes type of bucket that you give them between $7 and $10 million a year, and you hope you make good on the the number of years. Bullpens though are notoriously mercurial, up 1 year, down the next. Maybe you get 2 of the 3 years to be very good. Maybe you just sign him for 1 and hope for the best. If you're a team on the outside of the periphery of the playoff picture looking in, maybe you sign him for 1 year at big money and hope he has a great year for you, and then you trade him at the deadline and get what you can. Eat the money. But relief help is never going to go out of style for these teams. All right, let's go ahead and flip over on to the standings and just kind of look at where teams finished up last year. We'll start with the American League side and just see what teams how they should view themselves. Are we a contender? Are we a team that should be looking to try to save our assets for another season? Hey, better luck next year, that kind of a thing. We'll start with the American League East. The New York Yankees, they win the division, go all the way to the World Series. They absolutely should be looking to buy here in the offseason. Juan Soto, of course, we've already talked about. We've talked about them adding some starting pitching, some bullpen help. Gleyber Torres is out there, Clay Holmes. They have some work to do. I think the best case scenario for them is Juan Soto says, hey, me and Aaron Judge, we speak the same language. I'll take a little bit of a discount. Sign me for 10 years, $400 million, and I'll be yours. Something like that. We could see something like that for New York. I don't think he'll do that. I think Juan Soto's, going to take the best money available. If the deal turns out, like Tim says, to be, 14 for $630, I think that's a little bit out of the Yankees' price range. But the Yankees need to continue to improve that roster. That offense still lacks when Aaron Judge is not in that lineup and not performing in that lineup. They need to have some more help around him. Jazz Chisholm was a nice piece, but they need to continue to keep adding on to that roster. Guardians had a great first year under Stephen Vogt. Just an absolutely masterful job by him to get that team to perform as well as it did. 92 wins. Here's the thing about the American League. Do you see anybody in that American League there that has 100 wins? Any of them. Any of them at all. None of them. There was no big behemoth this year in the American League. And why is that? Teams like the Rangers, who had won the World Series, everybody's like, hey, what are they going to do for a follow-up? Fell on their face. Injuries, poor performance, whatever. Astros, always considered the best over the past 7 or 8 years in the AL West. 7th straight ALCS. They're still a very good team, but they're no longer thought of as a big behemoth in the American League. 88 and 73? That's not the Astros we've gotten used to. The Astros still have some big question marks to answer this offseason. We'll get into those in a minute. The Orioles, 91 wins. To me, this is the team I thought was going to win 100 games. They had the bullpen pieces to do it. They had the starting rotation finally to do it, and they just couldn't get it done. They struggled in the second half of the year at times. Still finished 20 games over 500, but to me, the conversation for the Orioles begins and ends with their starting pitching. Royals, great bump up for them. Nothing I can say badly about how that team performed this year. Just way to go. Keep it going. Tigers, same thing. Really like the way they've kind of built up that team. Mariners, once again, they fell short of expectations, at least to their own fan base. I thought they'd be they'd be right around that first team out, first team or the last team in for that wild card spot. That's exactly where they finished, one game out of the final wild card. They just don't have enough offense. Their pitching really took off this year, and they need to add some bats to that offense. A guy like Juan Soto or Shohei Ohtani last year really would have elevated that team to the stratosphere, but I don't think they're going to get it done. I just don't think they have the one, financial wherewithal to do it, and two, they're not attractive enough as a destination to get some of those big-time level free agents to get there. In which case, that leaves them with the Anthony Santander's of the world to contend with, the Teoscar Hernandez's of the world. Good players, absolutely, but they're not Shohei Ohtani. They're not Juan Soto. They're not Aaron Judge. They're not the Manny Machados of the world. They're not the Xander Bogaerts of the world. That's the level of player they need to get on the offensive side to get this team a little bit better. And that's kind of where my discussion is at with the Mariners. Until they bring in that aircraft carrier type of player to go along with Julio Rodriguez, they're a team that's lacking offensively for me. And until they do, maybe they have to trade one of those pitchers to be able to bring in a young guy on a team-friendly deal to be able to get the deal done. Pitchers generally are valued more than hitters. Moving on to the Twins, team that was in a little bit of a transition, was not thought of as being a good team at all in April. They really did not play like it either, really played above their heads for the final 5 months of the year. They ultimately finished 2 games over 500. Kirilloff, unfortunately, is going to I'd call it a career at 26 years old due to injuries. So their future first baseman that they had really been counting on is no longer going to be around. This is a team that I think needs to reset their expectations a little bit. They've gotten some really great performances out of players that they necessarily wouldn't have expected. Solano had a good year for them a couple years ago. Miranda's had some good success for them. But Buxton's injuries really kind of derailed their overall success. Carlos Correa is their big aircraft carrier in the middle of that lineup. He's up and down and has injury issues. This is a team that I think would be best trying to sell off 1 or 2 pieces, trying to stay competitive by bringing in low-cost, 1-year rental type of players, flipping up at the deadline if they're not successful, and if they are successful, tinkering around the periphery of that team at the deadline. I think this is a perennial wild card type of team. I don't think they're going to be a contender for the division, not with the Guardians performing as well as they did last year, and with the Royals getting better, and the Tigers. I think they're going to be right around that 7, 8, 9, 10 range in the American League going forward. Red Sox, listen, we talked about the AL East being possibly the best division in all of baseball last year, or coming into the year, with the Yankees, Orioles at the top. Rays, we expected to have a little bit of a step back with the McClanahan injury. But looking at it, the Red Sox really overperformed once again, and it's a tough division. They really made some tough decisions. I would say incorrect decisions moving on from Mookie Betts, but they're looking to model more of the Oakland A's method, the Tampa Bay Rays method, and try to get maximize their value for the dollar that they spend. That's the way the ownership wants to go. We can't fault them as fans. It's what the ownership has and what they want to do with their money. It is their money. It's not my money. It's theirs. And so that's the way they want to view this organization. I still think they need to go out there and invest in that rotation, though. They have to get a starter in there. That team has been crying out for a number 1 starter now for at least a few years. Chris Sale's injury issues really sidelined that top of the rotation starter that they've been needing. They got some nice production out of the guys this year. Bayo is probably their number 2 behind Burns. If Burns comes in as the number 1, or Fried, or whoever comes in as number 1 this year. But the Red Sox really overperformed this year, going 500. Rays, I think, also overperformed with the injury issues, off-the-field issues with Wander Franco, injuries, etc. Only to finish 2 games under 500. Impressive for them, but again, this is a team that's starting to see that window close a little bit for the contending group that they have. I think the trade of Paredes was the writing on the wall that they're ready to turn the page to their next contending team, say not this year, but next year. But they're still going to be a very competitive team. around that 80-win mark. I don't think they'll ever go below 70 wins again. I think they're too competitive a team, too much talent on that roster to go that low. Texas Rangers, World Series champions in 23, 6 games under 500 and out of the playoffs in 24. Injuries and poor offensive performance are the name of the game here. The worst catcher in all of baseball this year was the All-Star Game starter last year. So they need some improvement from Jonah Heim. They could look to bring Carson Kelly back. Travis d'Arnaud could be a fit since he was let go anyway by the Atlanta Braves. They're looking to bring back Heaney, possibly Eovaldi. They're looking to bring back some of their own guys. I think the writing's on the wall that Scherzer's probably going to go elsewhere. I think teams that are looking for a one-year type of a deal for a high-level player, think of the Dodgers, the Mets, teams like that have the money to go out there and sign a guy like that and have him miss 10 starts a season and still be able to call it a successful year. Rangers are not in that boat. They're trying to maximize the dollars right now. They went back to the way they were operating before the World Series now as far as targeting specific players that help them fit a need. So starting pitcher, number 2 in that rotation behind DeGrom is probably their biggest need right now with Eovaldi electing for free agency. Improving that offense and the bullpen and catcher are where their priorities are right now. But 78 wins after World Series, safe to say it was disappointing as a Ranger fan. And for speaking on behalf of Ranger fans, hopefully they can straighten things out and stay healthy next year. Adolis Garcia has to get out of the slump he was in last year as well. But depending on how you look at the numbers, there was some thought that maybe the collision that he had with Marcus Semien in May, that he was playing through an injury all season long. And it does seem that the numbers before that collision were much better than the numbers after that collision. But I'd say the numbers before and after weren't necessarily the Adolis Garcia that we saw in the playoff run in 23. So we'll see what happens. He was a late bloomer professionally anyway. Maybe this is just the lumps of a growing player. But the Rangers need some improvement out of Adolis for them to get back to the playoffs next year. Then we get to the Toronto Blue Jays. Finished 14 games under 500. This team did not play well. Jettisoned a lot of players off of this roster at the trade deadline. The questions around Bo Bichette. I think the questions around Vladimir Guerrero Jr. are really going to be where things begin for the Blue Jays this offseason. What do they do? Are they a buyer? Are they a seller? Do they try to tinker around the periphery? Do they go all in, or do they sell Bo Bichette, Vlad Guerrero Jr., or do they do a little bit of both? A lot of avenues that they can go. Expect them to be active this offseason, though. They need to pick a direction early and stick to it. The longer they wait to pick a direction, the worse I think it gets for the Blue Jays. If they just hold pat and maybe add a relief arm or two, maybe a number 5 starter to this rotation, I think this team probably finishes worse than 74 wins next year. If they are aggressive and try to sell off some pieces, maybe they still finish around 74, but they'll have a brighter future. If they hold on and add, maybe they bump themselves up to 80, 85 wins, maybe even above that if they really catch lightning in a bottle and get back to being the team we thought they would be a few years ago. The White Sox and Blue Jays, for my money, are probably the 2 most disappointing teams over the last 4 years. Last 3 teams here, the A's, the Angels, and the White Sox, all sellers at the deadline. All of them are looking for rebuilds right now. The Athletics are the only team I think that's looking to add a little bit to this roster, add a little bit to this offense, maybe with some 2 or 3 year deals, not necessarily 1 year stopgaps like they've been doing. But the A's are never a team that's going to spend money. They're going to be playing in Sacramento this year. It's going to look weird. It's going to feel weird. It's going to be different. Not necessarily a fan of all this, but we'll see what they turn into. But 69 wins, I think they're going to bump up next year, probably 74, maybe 75 wins. Angels, they're just going to have to get bad and stay bad for a little bit of time to get some of that high-level talent back in their prospect pool. They jettisoned what was left of their talent away when they tried to keep Ohtani. The last year he was there, ultimately it did not work. Team didn't make the postseason. All that, don't need to rehash it, but this is a team that needs to bottom out, get underneath that 60-win threshold, lottery, all that kind of thing. White Sox, same kind of thing. They only won 41 games, but they need to do a little bit better than that. They need to start getting some homegrown guys up to the major league level. 1 or 2 guys a year for, say, this year and next year is what I would look for as far as improvement here for the White Sox. If I'm a White Sox fan, I'd be happy with around 65 wins. That's a 24-win improvement, but you're still, 19 games under 500, something like that? It's not a pretty picture. They had finished 45 games out of the wild card. let's just say they were one of the worst, if not the worst team we've ever seen in Major League Baseball history. 121 losses. Just, ugh. On the National League side, World Series champion Dodgers, easy, buy. Maximize Ohtani's potential. Covered that already. Phillies, this is a team that, to me, is continuing to struggle when it matters most. When you get to October, sure, they can beat the Braves of the world, but they're struggling overcoming hills that we fully expect them to overcome. They have a really stacked offense. Their rotation looked good. Their bullpen, they addressed it at the deadline. They looked like they had all the pieces in the right spots. But I mean, we're talking about a team that's going to have to go up against the Dodgers, in the NLCS, and that's your best case scenario. This is a team that's going to have to improve and rework this roster a little bit. You can't put it all on Zach Wheeler in a start, and even in his starts, they're still not winning the game. For me, they still need another number one starter to come in there and kind of push this thing over the hill. Because right now, adding a number 2 or a 3 type starter hasn't been working for them. They got great production in the regular season. We're one of the best starting rotations in the first half of the season anyway. And they're still a very good team. I just think that there's more that they could have done, more that they should have done, more that they should have succeeded at and ultimately failed. That there's enough talent on this team that they can still course correct, but they're going to have to do it quickly. I would say they got probably this year and at best next year before we view them in the way we view the Toronto Blue Jays right now, as a team that had it all for a certain period of time and then fell on their face. All right, Milwaukee Brewers. Again, this was not going to be their year. We thought they would finish 3rd or 4th in this division because of the jettisoning of some of their talented players on this roster. Burns, most notably, the youth really delivered for them. They ultimately win 93 games. No other team in the Central even made the wild card. The next best team was the Cubs at 83 wins, 10 games up in their division. 10. I mean, this just does not look good in the Central right now. There's not a lot of behemoths there. Brewers, I think, are still going to be a good team. I don't think they're a behemoth either. I think easily the Cubs could jump up and get above them this coming season. I think you're looking at the Cardinals. If they add a number 1 starter to that rotation, if they get some consistency, but it shows you where the division's at. It's no longer the cream of the crop in the National League side. Welcome back, Vinny. Who can the Mets get for their bullpen? We've talked a little bit about the bullpen already. Guys like Jeff Hoffman make some sense. Pretty much anybody in that $7 to $10 million a year range, I think could be a good fit for pretty much any bullpen. It's just a matter of adding 1 or 2 of those guys that could come in and make a difference. Maybe a return for David Robertson would make some sense as well. But I think they need to add to that bullpen some guys that have some veteran experience. They tried a whole bunch of guys back there last year. Got really lucky anyway as far as the success that they found in a year where they were not expecting to contend. And so they need to capitalize on it and get those young guys to perform and supplement those young guys as well. Welcome in, Caleb. You think Terry Francona and the Reds front office will bring in any big names or decent names, any trades? I do think the Reds will shake it up a little bit. The writing was on the wall when they made that extension for their old manager. I just did not see David Bell staying there. He just did not have the pulse of that team. He was not going to elevate them into a wild card team. They were going to move on from him. Why they ultimately gave him an extension when I thought they were going to fire him, I don't know. 1 year later, they move on from him. So Terry Francona comes out of quote-unquote retirement. Baseball guy, baseball's in his blood, all that kind of thing, health problems aside. Francona brings some respectability, some knowledge to a very young and up-and-coming team. Now, we just said that the division in the Central is very winnable. Not exactly a behemoth there. Brewers win the division by 10 games. Cubs are going to be looking to add some starting pitching. What do I think they could do as far as additions? I don't think they're going to go crazy. They're not going to be a team in there for a guy like Juan Soto. They're not going to be in there for a Corbin Burns. But I do think they could go in there for possibly at the very tip top of the market would be a guy like Max Fried, kind of headline that rotation. Maybe trade off 1 or 2 pieces to save some money. Might be their best case forward, sell one of their prospects in order to get off of the money on some of their other deals that they've made in the past few years. But I think the Reds, with Elly De La Cruz offensively kind of holding things down, bringing in a #1 starting pitcher probably is the biggest impact on this roster. But we saw Francona just work with the Guardians. They never really did that. And he made it work, got them to the postseason. I think that the Reds saw the success that he had in Boston, saw the success that he had in Cleveland, and were like, of course, baseball mind wants to come back. Of course we want him to come in and be our manager. But I don't think they're necessarily going to go crazy. I think the best case scenario is they land a guy like Fried, but I think more realistically they're going to be looking in that 30 to 50 range as far as best free agents available to improve that roster. Do I think they win the World Series even if they get all the chips to break the right way? I don't. But I think there is room for improvement. I think they could very well win the division. Like I said, there's no behemoth. Brewers could easily have their rotation perform poorly and they finish 5 games under 500. The Cubs could do what they did this year and finish at 83 games. Reds finished with 77. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the youth on that team, the manager David Bell, all that kind of thing, just not really working out. So for my money, I still think the Reds are going to be a significantly better team next year. I think they'll be above 500. The question will be how much further above 500 will they be? If they get a guy like Fried, I think they could easily get into the 90-win category. If they kind of piecemeal it together, I think they're more likely in the 85, 87 range, maybe 83, but a winning record and in contention for a wild card spot. Moving on to the wild card teams, Padres, Braves, and Mets. Braves, of course, had World Series aspirations coming into the year. Chris Sale found the fountain of youth. Great year for Ronaldo Lopez, but they're still very thin offensively and in that pitching staff. One injury from Ronald Acuna and their offense really took a backslide. They still have a lot of talent and a lot of guys locked up at their offensive positions. You've got first base locked up with Olsen, Riley at third, Albies at second anyway. Shortstop with, I can see his face. Probably the lowest cost there. What was his name? Anyway, they've got their team basically locked up with Acuna in the outfield along with Ozuna is going to be back. The option was picked up by the Braves. This is still a very good team. Acuna is going to be healthy again. They're going to get Spencer Strider back from injury, but they need to add some starting pitching and they need some depth in that starting rotation as well. If they add some starting pitching here, maybe retain Max Fried if they're lucky enough, but I think more likely they're going to go the pitching route and possibly bring in a guy like Andrew Heaney to replace him. I think they're going to go that route rather than the top of the market in Fried. But they're going to be right there for a World Series once again. Padres, to me, really overperformed everybody's expectations this year. 93 wins. I thought they'd be around that 85 to 90 range. They got all the way up to 93. Class of that division is still the Dodgers, though. I think the Diamondbacks are going to be right there. They finished with 89 wins. At least the Diamondbacks did. But for the Padres, I think bringing back Profar is priority number 1 as far as the offense is concerned. But I think they need to add one more starting pitcher is their biggest priority this offseason. Bringing back a Blake Snell makes a ton of sense for them. Would really solidify things with Joe Musgrove's injuries last year. Darvish getting a little bit older. All that kind of a thing. So for me, Padres need to add a starter. Braves need to add some depth starting pitching, maybe even bring back Fried. For the Mets, they're going to spend, and they're going to spend, and they're going to spend. They're going to be a team that at very least makes the wild card next year. I would put them in contention along with the Braves and Phillies to win the division. They should be that good, whoever they bring in this offseason. I think there's a real chance they could bring in Sasaki. I think there's a chance they could bring in Soto. If they bring in Soto, I think they're going to be the team that could bid the highest on a Juan Soto, possibly the Dodgers, but I think the Mets probably have the biggest offer on the table for a guy like Juan Soto. And I think he would really elevate that team offensively. They need to add some starting pitching. They got so much of it on free agents, or in free agency anyway, and with injury issue question marks going forward, that they need to add a starting pitcher. The outside of the playoff picture, looking in teams, the Diamondbacks and the Cubs both need to add a little bit around the periphery. First and foremost, bringing back Christian Walker is priority 1, 2, and 3 for the Diamondbacks as far as I'm concerned. Number 4 has to be offloading the money of Jordan Montgomery to try to retain Christian Walker and maybe add another piece around the periphery of that roster. That's where things are at for the Diamondbacks. They're probably going to be a wild card team next year. Maybe on the outside looking in again, if they don't get a deal done for Christian Walker, they could be even lower than that, around 75 wins if they don't get something like that done. Cubs, they're going to add some starting pitching. Question is going to be what and who. Where are they going to spend the money at? How much are they going to spend? Are they going to add to their offense as well? But for me, they have to add at least one frontline starter. a number 1 or 2 starter, and at least one more depth starter as well. I think there's so much meat on the bone there for that Cubs team that they need to invest a little bit in that rotation. Does Alonso stay with the Mets? Well, Vinny, I appreciate the question. If you guys want to hit that like and subscribe in the stream, we'd really appreciate it. But as far as to answer your question, does Alonso stay with the Mets? For my money, I think Cohen sees Alonso as Mr. Met and really is the biggest impact as far as power that's on the free agent market. I think that's going to drive the price for Alonso up a little bit from where I would be comfortable with it and with other teams where they would be comfortable with it, to where he probably gets in that $115, $125 million range for 5 years. I think he's probably more realistically around an $18 to $20 million player outside of the Mets organization, but I think the Mets might overpay him just a little bit to keep him in New York. He really likes playing there too. So I'd put the chances of him staying with the Mets around 60%. I'd put the other 40 split up between teams that could use some first base help, like the Astros, teams like the Rangers if they move off of Nathaniel Lowe. Mariners could always use some offense as well. Let's look at the St. Louis Cardinals. Cardinals finished the year 83-79. Again, this is a team that was up and down, up and down. I just don't see consistency. I don't see where the elevation is going to be coming from within. Mason Wynn, great young player, but outside of that, there's not a whole lot for me to look at and say, yep, that's the reason why they're going from 83 to 90 wins. I think we're going to be around a 500 team again for the Cardinals. Giants, if they get a deal done for Juan Soto, this could be an 87, 88 win team. If they don't, and they sign some of the guys like Anthony Santander, the Group B and Group C free agent guys all over again, I think we're once again looking around an 80 to a 75 win team. And we'll see what happens the rest of the way. But for the Giants, they need to get a top flight free agent in there and an offensive one to really take the pressure off that offense. They haven't really had anybody like Barry Bonds since Barry Bonds. I mean, there's no real threat in that lineup. For teams coming in there, there's no one for them to look at and go, hey, we need to be careful to this guy in that lineup. And a guy that elevates performance. Think of the way the Rangers decided to invest in Marcus Semien and Corey Seager when there really wasn't a whole lot of veteran guys on the roster that were performing well. They had a lot of young guys that could do it if they progressed a little bit, and ultimately they did, win a World Series. Maybe the Giants could do something similar, bringing in, Juan Soto, spending a little bit above market for him to bring him in. Cincinnati Reds, we talked about them a little bit with the Terry Francona question. For me, I think they're probably in that 85 win category with Terry Francona. I think they're in that wild card discussion. Could very well win the division because, again, I don't think the Brewers are a lock to win the division next year. They're such a young team, and they're going to be going through some growing pains next year, I do believe. Pirates, they need to add some offense. Paul Skeens, that pitching staff look very good, but they need to improve that offense. If they do a small, around the periphery deals with like 1 year, $8 million type of players, do I think they ultimately, get to the promised land, get to a wild card, ultimately win the division, go on, compete for the World Series? I don't think they're going to do it. If they get guys that are a little bit higher value, 3 for 42 like we did for Tyler O'Neill, I feel a little bit more confident about their ability to make a wild card. But I don't think this team, there's no player out there, even a Juan Soto type player, that would come in and make this a World Series contending team. I don't think the Pirates view it that way. I think they view this as the Paul Skeens era of their team, and so they need to try to maximize that. So they're going to add a little bit of offense here and there. One outfielder, maybe utility infielder type that can produce for them on a low-cost budget type of a deal. They're never going to spend like $40 million on per year on a contract. So don't feel like they're going to go and do that. They've never done that. They're not going to start now. Washington Nationals finished 20 games under 500, but again, young team ascending. C.J. Abrams had the issues anyway towards the very end of the year. Injuries at the very end of the year as well to some of their young starting pitchers. I think the first half of the year might look a little bit more of the same for the Nationals, but I think the second half of the year next year they'll close strong. I think they could very well get to 78, 80 wins next year and then really take off the following year. Now, they're a team that's rumored to be in there for Juan Soto. I don't think they're going to win it. I think they're going to save their powder for next year when they've proven concept anyway that their young guys are ready to go. Bruce, welcome in. Do you feel Soto could end up in Philadelphia? Oh, man. I'm never going to say no when it comes to Dave Dombrowski. That being said, no. Dave Dombrowski has done a lot of great things, made a lot of great moves for a lot of great teams. I just don't think Juan Soto is in the cards for Philadelphia. Now, we talked earlier in the video anyway about how Philadelphia needed to do something to shake up their roster a little bit. They seem to have hit a ceiling anyway. When they get to the postseason, whenever they get to the postseason, they just don't play to the level we expect them to. I mean, we saw them lose the Diamondbacks last year. This year, more of the same. Can this team, who looks so good on paper, probably one of the best teams in the regular season last year, Dodgers ultimately win the World Series, is this a team that could, make a jolt like that and, really put the pedal to the metal? They could, but I think it would be more on the pitching side that they would want to do it. Do you feel Scherzer will ever regain his form or come close to being even 75% as he once was? Okay, that's a little disingenuous, Bruce. His numbers, Max Scherzer's numbers, are actually still very good. The question for him is health, and can he stay healthy? Can you count on him? All those kinds of things. Am I saying he's sub-2 ERA Max Scherzer? No. But Max Scherzer was only that for a short period of time in his career. Max Scherzer, to me, at this point in his career, is still a sub-3 ERA guy who sometimes gives up the long ball. When he was on in the World Series year with the Texas Rangers, he was a sub-2 ERA guy for a course of about 10 starts before he got injured at the end of the 23 season. This past year, of course, with the back issue, the arm issue, etc., never really was able to stay healthy for a consistent period of time. But when he was healthy, when he finally was able to get string back-to-back starts together, he was very effective. Basically, the Rangers used some of his time at the Major League level as a little bit of a rehab assignment. They've been known to do this with Major League players in the past, where they let them rehab at the Major League level. They did that with Ian Kinsler for a time. They did that with Adrian Beltre for a time. They do that with Corey Seager. He never goes to the minor leagues for a rehab assignment. They basically did the same thing with Eovaldi the year before when they won the World Series. Max Scherzer, they let him start a couple of games in the minors, but towards the end of the year, they're like, hey, it's now or never, so they threw him in the fire. But to me, I think he's still got a lot left in the tank. How much is left? When I say a lot, we're probably talking, at best, maybe 2 years. But to me, we're still seeing declining returns. For a team to invest, say, 2 years, $60 million, nuts. Absolutely nuts. If we're talking about 1 year, $18 to $20 million for a guy like Max Scherzer, sign me up. If we're talking 2 years, $40 million, I'm still saying sign me up, but I'm a little bit more hesitant, and you have to have a better plan with having, say if he does get injured for a month or two, you have to have a plan for when he's out to have still productive Major League level experience in that spot. Rangers had that in spades last year, and they really used that depth last year. The pitching really kept them afloat. It was the offense that really let them down the entire year and injuries. But for me, do I feel Max Scherzer will regain his form? I don't think he's ever lost it. I think injuries just are more of a question than they ever have been. And I guess in that respect, do we get 75% of Max Scherzer? 100% of Max Scherzer? Is he healthy for 32 starts, 30 starts or whatever? I don't think we'll ever see that version of Max Scherzer again. But maybe a Max Scherzer where he starts 20, 18 games for you, and if that's high level enough for you to value him at $18 million for those 20 starts, that's $1 million a start that you're basically paying him for, and then you're paying him for the start in the postseason as well. So kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at Max Scherzer. Rounding out the National League side here, as far as the free agency, hot stove season anyway, we got the Marlins at 62 wins, Rockies at 61. Marlins were really hoping to have a down year this year, and being able to trade some of their great young starting pitchers that they have. Unfortunately, injuries really derailed their plans to sell at the deadline this past season. Shoemaker is now a member of the Texas Rangers front office. I think that's a little bit of a mistake by them. The Marlins really should have kept him around. He was good for that organization. Rangers will be very happy to have him, though. Rockies are in a different situation altogether. To me, they should have moved on from their manager last year. They should have wiped house, changed things up in Colorado. I get it. Colorado's a different animal than every other market in Major League Baseball. I understand. I can hear you, Colorado fans. I can hear you, Bud Black. I can hear you, the front office there in Colorado. I get that it's different. But that still doesn't address the problem. Just saying it's different is not a solution to the problem that you have. Just saying, we acknowledge there's a problem is not a solution. The solutions that you've tried and tried and tried again have all failed. Now it's time to try something different. If I was a GM, if I was the owner of the Colorado Rockies, Day one, I'm wiping house, cleaning things out from the front office and the coaching staff. I would try to bring in Skip Schumacher because he's probably the best. I would say he's among the top 2 or 3 managers that are available right now. Sounds like he wants to take a year away from managing, kind of get things right in his head with his family, take a year off, all that kind of thing. Good on him. But if I'm looking for a manager, he's one of the ones I call first when he's ready to coach again. So if I'm the Rockies, though, I clean house. Then I look at what the pieces that I have and what I can get for him. Ryan McMahon, I would have traded him at the deadline. Love him, but there's no place on him on my roster. He's not going to be part of the next winning team. I would have tried to maximize Chris Bryant, see if I can keep him healthy up to the trade deadline, or at least until June. Eat half of that deal that's left, trade him off, get him off of my books, and live with what's left. Then, once you've got some more spaces on that roster, allow some of the more of those young guys to come up, and then make those 1 year, $2 million deals, the 2 year, $10 million deals with free agents that could be valuable at the trade deadline. Get some better prospects in there. And then as far as the philosophy for the organization, I'm not looking for guys who can spin it. I'm looking for guys who can sink that ball more than anything else, because that's the only thing that's been proven to work as far as a pitcher in Colorado. Guys who throw really hard, straight line fastballs, though, get hit very long way. If you're looking for a guy that can sink the ball a little bit better, that's where they can find some success. And sure, it's a limited way that they can go forward. And teams can game plan for them if they go straight sinker baller after sinker baller after sinker baller. Maybe a guy that has a different arm angle. Maybe a guy that throws 100 every now and again. And then another guy who has really good sink. Mixing it up that way would be the way I would go if I'm Colorado, rather than guys who have a really good curveball. Curveballs don't curve in Colorado, and especially when you get into the winter. So that would be my path forward for Colorado. They don't need to be spending on aircraft carrier type players like Chris Bryant again for a very long time, at least until they get somebody up and coming in their roster that you can point to and say, hey, that guy's a star. And right now, I'm not sure that guy is on the roster. So right now, I would go ahead and just try to retool that roster, retool that organization entirely. For the Marlins, they need to get healthy, probably do what they're trying to do this past year, get healthy, sell the arms at the deadline, regroup, and have a path forward after 2025. But we'll see what they do. So that's the entire Major League Baseball, what they're going to be looking for, or where I see them at the winter meetings this year, what they're going to be looking for. Let's go ahead and kind of look at a couple other things, though, before we finish off. Some of the headlines from around Major League Baseball. Mookie Betts is looking to move back to the infield. No surprise there. Get him off of his feet in the outfield a little bit more. Infield could be a little bit more taxing, but I think if you move him to like a second base spot, might take a little bit more wear and tear off of his knees as he gets a little older. He's a great player. Just preserving him is the name of the game for a guy like Mookie Betts. We mentioned the Kyle Hendricks deal to the LA Angels, 1 year, $3 million. Let's go over the qualifying offer guys, though, as well. Let me see here. There it is. 13 players received qualifying offers. We'll kind of run through the list real quick. You can see them on the screen. Juan Soto, Corbin Burns, Alex Bregman, Max Fried, Willie Adames, Pete Alonso, Anthony Santander, Teoscar Hernandez, Nick Pivetta, Christian Walker, Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, and Nick Martinez. Nick Martinez was given a qualifying offer. Just letting you know that. Nick Martinez got a qualifying offer. Why did the Reds do that? I don't understand. I know they need arms. I know they're trying to get performance. I know he's got some starting potential and relief potential, but we're talking about Nick Martinez getting a qualifying offer. No, thank you. If I'm Nick Martinez, I sign that thing right now. Severino and Manaea, those are interesting cases. They could sign the offer strictly because they're guys that are probably going to get 2-3 year deals maximum in the open market right now at around $20 million. If you prove it one more year on the qualifying offer, not only do you not have the qualifying offer attached to you next year, then you have another year of proven track record of performance that you can go into free agency and get a 5-year, 6-year deal rather than a 2 or 3 year deal this offseason. So those are two guys who should really that should really focus on that offer. Christian Walker, only way I see him taking it is if he just wants to stay in Arizona for one more year and not have the qualifying offer attached to his name. Could very well happen, but I think he's going to do very well in free agency. I think he's going to pull very similar numbers to a guy like Pete Alonso. Maybe not as big, over $100 million, but maybe in that Adrian Beltre range, 5 for 85, 4 for 85 range, somewhere in there. Nick Pivetta, I think he's another case that could take the qualifying offer, but more likely will go towards free agency and see what he can get on the open market. Teoscar Hernandez has the qualifying offer. I don't think that's going to matter, though, because I think the Dodgers are going to do right by him and get him a multi-year deal. 3 for 60 sounds about like what could happen there. Anthony Santander to the Orioles. Maybe he just wants to stick around with this club one more year and not have the qualifying offer attached to his name. Could very well happen. That would be another one that could sign the qualifying offer. That's it. Those are the only guys that I think have a chance of taking the qualifying offer. Pete Alonso, he's going to go to free agency. I think the Mets are going to retain him anyway, though. 5-120, 5-125 seems to be the market where it's at right now, or at least what the expectation is for him. I personally would go a little bit less than that, 100 to 110, but you know, when you have the best power hitter in the game, prices tend to get a little higher in free agency. Owners like the long ball. Willy Adames, best shortstop on the market. There's not really too many shortstops out there for him to compete with on the market as well. Max Fried, starting pitcher, injury issue, question marks, but he's still going to get a really nice number in free agency. He's not going to take the qualifying offer. Same for Alex Bregman as far as performance issues, not necessarily injury related. Corbin Burns, probably the best starting pitcher available this winter. Really curious to see where he ultimately goes. Orioles, Red Sox, Dodgers, pretty much any team that could use some starting pitching is going to touch base with Corbin Burns. And then, of course, Juan Soto. He's going to get ludicrous money. Of course, he's going to decline the qualifying offer. So those are the 13 names. Appreciate you guys joining us today. We're getting back into the swing of things. We'll be live with you guys again tomorrow night. We'll get back into our daily routine, breaking down the hot stove rumblings out there, the hot stove rumors, and possibly get some trades here in the next couple of weeks. Usually when we get through the winter meetings, I think they just had the GM meetings in Texas anyway. We got about a month until the winter meetings. I will see if I can go to those. I've already requested off from work. I've gotten it approved. So I will be bringing you live coverage of the winter meetings as well, hopefully from the hotel, but we shall see. Appreciate you guys joining us today. If you guys want to hit that like and subscribe, feel free to drop us a comment if you're watching this video after we are live. Feel free to send us a super chat. I do pay attention to those, and I will try to be answering those questions for you in some videos as well. We'll have some new videos coming out. We're trying a new format. Very busy the last couple of months anyway, but we're going to be doing some new things here at the Upside. You're going to see the daily videos that you've gotten used to the last several years of us doing these in the winter through the hot stove season anyway. And then we're going to go back to doing some shorts for you as well on YouTube, short 15 to 60 second videos as to what's happening around Major League Baseball. We'll touch a little bit on the NBA now that it's back and rolling. The NFL, how much more in the hole can the Cowboys really go? Sorry, Cowboys fans, speaking as one. It's going to be a miserable 4 or 5 years, so buckle up. For hockey, of course, that's still going, but I know most of my audience is going to be baseball fans, so we're going to primarily be focusing on our baseball content. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe. Send us a super chat if you want to just support the channel. We really do appreciate that, and y'all have a great one.